Ghana has rejected a multi-million-dollar US aid package under the American First Global Health Strategy, citing threats to data sovereignty. A Rome Institute country director Nana Kofi-Kwaki, in a recent interview in Accra, said the deal would have compromised citizens' personal health information, with requests going beyond research purposes into potential private corporate use. Ghana's Data Protection Commission confirmed the proposed access exceeding legal limits, including sensitive test data. Kwaki called the move a wake-up call for African nations to unite in negotiating health financial deals, stressing the need to protect sovereignty and privacy. Reports suggest the US sought 25 years of data access despite offering only 5 years of funding. Ghana joined Zimbabwe and Zambia in rejecting similar agreements, while Washington says it has signed 32 deals worth over $20 billion with other countries. The World Health Organization is coordinating an international response after a suspected hantavirus outbreak aboard a Dutch-flagged cruise ship left 3 people dead. WHO's acting director for the Department of Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness and Prevention, Maria van Kerkhove, said the priority is to medically evacuate 2 critically ill individuals, while other sick crew members will be flown to the Netherlands for treatment. 7 confirmed or suspected cases have been reported on the MV Hondius, which has been held off Cape Verde after authorities refused docking. The vessel had been carrying about 150 people on a nature expedition since March. Officials say hantavirus is usually spread through contact with rodents, though human-to-human transmission cannot be ruled out in this case. Spain is reviewing whether the ship can dock in the Canary Islands for further investigation. WHO stresses the wider public risk remains low. Romania's parliament has ousted Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan after passing a vote of no confidence in his coalition government. The motion on Tuesday, backed by 281 lawmakers, easily surpassed the required threshold, ending a pro-European coalition that had been in power for less than a year. Bolojan warned before the vote that Romania risks losing credibility and facing deeper fiscal troubles, with the deficit already at 7.9% of GDP, far above EU limits. President Nicolae appointed Bolojan last June, but his government struggled with shaky finances and political divisions. Lawmakers from coalition partners abstained, leaving the prime minister isolated. Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan has called on East African nations to stand firm against cross-border youth protests, warning that Gen Z-led movements are attempts to spread chaos and destabilize the region. Speaking Tuesday at the Tanzania-Kenya Business Forum in Dar es Salaam, Hassan said she coordinated with Kenyan President William Ruto to respond to unrest, stressing that democracy must align with local customs and traditions. She urged unity against instability, noting that turmoil in Nairobi directly affects Dar es Salaam. The remarks follow a wave of youth-driven protests that began in Kenya over tax hikes and governance issues, inspiring similar movements in neighboring countries. The International Court of Justice has opened hearings in The Hague on the decades-long dispute between Guyana and Venezuela over the resource rich Esequibo region. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Pinto defended Caracas's claim of historical sovereignty, dismissing Guyana's argument as manipulation. He insisted no court can question Venezuela's rights to the territory. Guyana's Foreign Minister Hugh Todd called the case existential, noting Esequibo makes up 2/3 of the country's territory and is vital for its future. The UN's top court will examine the legitimacy of the 1899 arbitral award that set the current border. Venezuela argues the ruling was nullified by the 1966 Geneva Agreement with Britain, Guyana's former colonial power. Tensions in the Gulf are rising again as Iranian lawmaker Manouchehr Mottaki has warned the United States against attempts to control passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking in Tehran on Tuesday, Mottaki called the strait a red line, claiming Iranian forces fired warning shots near the U.S. naval vessels. He cautioned that any further attempts would be met with direct fire, insisting Iran will not lose control of the waterway, even at the cost of another war. The remarks come as Washington enforces a naval blockade on Iranian ports following Tehran's restrictions on access for what it calls unfriendly nations. The dispute escalated after a joint US-Israel operation against Iran in February, sparking retaliatory strikes and instability across the region. A ceasefire took effect last month, but negotiations remain stalled. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Beijing on Wednesday, with talks focused on bilateral ties and regional development. China remains a key buyer of Iranian oil, defying US sanctions, and has reportedly played a quiet role in mediating between Tehran and Washington via Pakistan. The meeting comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio urged Beijing to pressure Iran to ease its chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, warning that global isolation looms. China has not confirmed its mediation role, but has said it works tirelessly for peace. The visit also precedes President Trump's planned trip to Beijing on May 14 to 15, where he will meet President Xi Jinping to discuss trade and regional tensions. US President Donald Trump says Project Freedom, the operation to guide ships out of the Strait of Hormuz, has been paused less than 48 hours after it began. He cited requests from Pakistan and other nations and progress toward a possible agreement with Iran. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared the US military campaign against Iran over, insisting the war powers resolution is unconstitutional. He warned Tehran must prove it does not seek nuclear weapons. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said his country is ready for dialogue under international law but will not surrender to unilateral US demands. He stressed Iran's right to nuclear technology while Iraq offered to mediate. At the same time, Iran introduced new rules requiring ships to seek permission before transiting the Strait of Hormuz, escalating the maritime standoff. Russia's defense ministry has announced a two-day ceasefire on May 8 and 9 to mark the end of World War II in Europe, urging Ukraine to follow suit. Officials warned that any attempt to disrupt Victory Day celebrations, including strikes on Moscow, would trigger a major retaliatory attack on Kyiv. The ministry said security measures are in place and advised residents and diplomats in the Ukrainian capital to leave in a timely manner. President Zelenskyy dismissed the truce as unfair, claiming Moscow only discussed it with the US. He later declared Ukraine would begin its own ceasefire on May 5, acting reciprocally. Russia has previously paused operations during holidays, including Easter and Orthodox Christmas, though many of those truces were quickly broken. A sea of flowers and handwritten notes has turned East Bekasi Station into a site of mourning after last week's deadly rail collision that killed 16 women and injured more than 90 people. Footage showed commuters pausing to read messages of condolence and lay bouquets along the platform. The crash occurred when an electric taxi stalled at a crossing, triggering a chain of events that led an express train to slam into a stationary commuter train. A woman-only carriage was the most heavily impacted. The tragedy has sparked debate over rail safety and gender-segregated cars. Officials have apologized after controversial remarks, while investigators probe signaling and mechanical failures. PT Kereta Api Indonesia has set up trauma support at the station for survivors.